Honestly, I thought this was going to be like a way worse look. This is definitely like, good morning. I just literally rolled out of bed. Hello, hi. This is the start of yet another potentially fruitless series of work in progress vlogs. Last night we were catching up on the new season of What We Do in the Shadows and took some notes about tailoring and about adding pad stitching and hair canvas to jackets. I have a couple of projects that actually are somewhat complicated or have weird patterning that I'm gonna need to put some hair canvas into. But also, I have a really old project that I abandoned and never came back to. So we are going to be working on Elliott from Stardew Valley. I started Elliott 6 years ago? 5 years ago? A while ago. And I actually stopped because I couldn't get the tailcoat to look right. So I made the whole tailcoat, and my memory says that it fit pretty well, but that I was like, really having problems with the lapels, and the answer is because I didn't know how to tailor. It had nothing to do with the fact that I had, velveteen as my shell material, or that my patterning was particularly off, though we will see if it's really off. We mainly just didn't know how to pad stitch and like make nice looking lapels and shit. I kept like doing top stitching and like tacking things down in weird ways, trying to get these lapels to sit properly. So I thought, like, number one, let's finish a UFO. And two, let's practice this tailoring stuff on something that doesn't have quite as much time or money put into it. The velveteen was just like off of fabric.com, I think. So it was not too expensive, and I do have more of it. I think it's because I didn't do the sleeves yet, so we'll need to check to make sure I have enough for the sleeves. But there should be enough to recut the top part of the lapel, like the collar part of the lapel, because we'll need to cut those on the bias, and then from there we should be able to make some nice looking sleeves. But yeah, so we're gonna do that and hopefully learn some stuff. Hopefully have like an actual finished garment at the end of all of this that I can wear. It's gonna be like my short-term project because I really, really shouldn't need like anything for it. We'll find out. We'll find out. My sewing room may be a disaster, but I do have a work in progress shelf that I decided existed when we first moved in here, and it actually had, this is the trousers, and then this is the jacket, and I put them there, and actually all of the spare fabric, if you can see, there's some cabbage. All of the spare fabric that goes with these two pieces, this costume, was actually already on the work in progress shelf. So even though my sewing room is a disaster because I'm in the process of pulling everything off the shelves and deciding how to put it up in a smarter way, everything is together except for the spare red velveteen, which should be with the tea set. I keep pulling it out to use for tea settings for Ferdinand von Ayer. It's very bright red, so it goes well with that. But let me go ahead and just get this on, and we will take a look and see what we're working with. So this is where we are with this project. There are some like prayer safety pins that have been put in that are supposed to be like, I guess tailoring it so that it sits like this, which is not great, but like, there have been worse made suits. The top flips up, which I can't really show you, and there's a safety pin to tailor it in the back. So there's actually already some stuff that we'll be able to do to kind of fix this. But as you can see, the lapels don't really sit right. If I pull these pins out, actually, it just kind of flops. And part of that's because I made this facing piece. I made the facing and just kind of hangs. So this, I guess, was another problem that I was having, that it like flips up, but if I pull this top stitching out and just like actually tailor the front of it, it probably won't be as big of a deal. I got it kind of doing what it needed, but I never really got it where it needed, so it's something that we can definitely work with. I don't actually remember if it was going to close or if it was just supposed to like stay like this, so we'll make that decision at some point in the future. It's, there have been worse tailcoats. I've changed shape significantly since I started this. But yes, there are no sleeves, so whatever red velveteen I have left needs to be prioritized for the sleeves first. And I have just a standard sleeve pattern that I'm going to cut and use. If I need to adjust the arm size, I can. But it looks like these are okay. I might have too much. I don't know if I can. Yeah, I might have too much in the back. Tailoring on the back is actually not terrible, so we'll figure it out. I found the extra velveteen. The bad news is it has been catted up, and there's actually like a small vomit stain, it looks like, where somebody had a hairball. So we do have the extra velveteen here, and it's a couple of folds worth, so hopefully that's enough for the sleeves. But let me go ahead and get the sleeves traced and cut out, and we will see what we have left to work with to fit new lapels on. So it turns out there's actually tons of this velveteen left over, so it's not going to be a problem at all to recut those lapel pieces, which, hooray! But this is actually, like, folded and folded again into fourths, so there's plenty off screen, and this is more than enough for the sleeve, so that's really great. Also, it's really funny, I had some issues getting my hair canvas. I ordered them from an Amazon seller like 2 months ago, and they gave me the runaround, and then they were like really sounding like they were scamming me, and as it turns out, they ordered hair canvas from Walmart and had it shipped to me, which, you know, that's a twist. Whatever, I got the hair canvas, didn't have to like get a refund or whatever, but I had already ordered new canvas from somewhere else, and so now I ended up having 2 things of hair canvas, and I ended up selling one of the bolts to someone else, a friend of mine, Anna, who will be using it for some stuff soon. But it's funny, I started watching somebody else's progress vlog, and they were talking about the quality of the hair canvas, and then they showed the bolt, and it's the same bolt that I've gotten. So I think it's funny that all of us have ended up deciding that we're going to buy bolts of hair canvas and do lots of tailoring during quarantine. I don't know why, but that just strikes me as really hilarious. I have some regrets, mainly because I forgot that this is a jacket and not a shirt, so I may have to add a strip along the bottom, which won't be a big deal, to make it the proper width to comfortably wear a shirt under. But before I get started on any sewing today, I need to make myself another thimble, because somehow, every time I make myself a thimble, it goes missing. And I suspiciously look at my cat specifically, and think that she has a collection of my thimbles somewhere, but thankfully I have a million scraps of light leather from various leatherworking projects, so we're going to be making another thimble really quick. And then we'll get started with breaking it in, doing some pad stitching and whatnot. 2 thimbles. This time I actually made 2 of them. One is kind of a backup thimble, and will be immediately put in one of the locking portions of my sewing tower so that it is always there for me, because it's actually way easier to make a thimble when you have a thimble. I'm probably going to alternate between them today and like break them in a little bit. Sadie's going to rub on them so that they get her stink all over them. And then I was clever enough this time to actually trace the pieces ahead of time, because I seem to, every time I make it a slightly different size and shape. So when I liked the size and shape of this thimble, I actually had already traced pieces for a second one and went ahead with them and then traced them top and bottom onto my tailoring notes, so that once one of these inevitably goes missing, we actually have pattern pieces here to cut out new ones. And I make the top slightly smaller than the bottom because I have stupid fat fingers, and that helps it stay in place on my finger better. These are still very stiff. I don't know if you're getting that good leather creak, Asmer. But yeah, they're still very stiff. I'll break these in, and when they inevitably go missing, I will make another one. Hooray, thimbles. Okay, so I have pulled the lapel off of the jacket. It looks like I actually initially had them both with a center seam because I didn't really know what I was doing. Then it was actually pinned to take some space out of the center seam, because for some reason when I made them, it flares out here. So this is one of the outer lapel pieces. And you can see it's got like a nice lapel shape. It's kind of wonky. I used a different piece to trace. But you can see it's got like a decent shape, But then I just had a fundamental misunderstanding of how this goes, and that, like, I think I needed more, like, material there so that it could fold over, which is actually not the case because I didn't understand. So there was a pin here, and it's actually, in some of the other pieces, there are long-term creases in the velveteen, which I think is interesting, from that. So I took them apart, and I traced the lapel because it wasn't a bad shape, like I said, and I just cut off that bit on the corner up here so that it's got a straight line. And I'm actually going to cut the two on the bias that'll be for the under collar, and those will have seam allowance here so that I can make a center seam. And then there will be two cut from the hair canvas going in the direction of this center seam to help give it structure and shape. And then there'll be a line here in that will change the direction of the stitching. Some of it will be going this way around the collar, and then the rest of it will be going this way towards the hem. That'll help it fold over. And then I'm going to, since I have so much extra fabric, I'm going to recut the top lapel out of a single layer on the fold here and with the straight grain. That's the current plan for this. And I know I sounded incredibly confident there. I'm not actually incredibly confident, but this is what I think I'm supposed to be doing. I'm excited. I'm eager to try this out, and I hope that it goes well. I was worried at first because it doesn't really look like I have been successful when I had just done, like, the interior band, because as you can see, it just still sits like that. Like, listen, I understand it's kind of a duh sort of thing, because obviously if you just stitch down this part and you don't stitch down that part, then where's the contrast? But you can see that contrast here, because this interior portion wants to stand up like this. So, like, right here where all the stitching stops is where it suddenly flattens out. And I think that's pretty neat. I will say, however, that I am jealous of everybody who makes beautiful videos using DSLRs and has lots of gorgeous B-roll that they play, because your boy just doesn't have that kind of energy. There's a DSLR sitting like 6 feet in front of me. There's a tripod sitting 2 feet behind that. I could be setting all this up to do that, but I won't. So, obviously what I just said is a lie. You're obviously looking at some footage right now that's been done overhead of me pressing my collar piece not so amazingly. I've since learned that you're supposed to do this a little differently. Apparently trying to go for like a really harsh crease is not what you want to do, but I'm still figuring this stuff out, and this is the Jay of like a month later who's telling you this, who has since done a lot more research and been involved in many more projects and actually picked up a book on tailoring. What the fuck is that? You won't see anything about that in the next few videos. But anyway, that's what I did. I ended up grabbing my webcam and set it up on top of the tripod and had it point down at my lap desk while I did a little bit of work. So I did some pressing. I then took the pattern that I used for the lower piece and used it to create an upper piece. This one's a little different because it's done on the fold instead of having two separate pieces, because you don't actually need it to be cut with the bias grain going towards the centerpiece. Instead, you want to have it going towards the outer edges. So it actually makes it fold a little bit nicer and it lays pretty flat, and you don't have that annoying top seam. That's really only something that you can do when you're doing a notched lapel like this. That's actually the correct way to do it, so I did. So once everything was pinned together, it was time to sew the outer shell to the tailored inner portion of the collar, and I chose to do that by hand, because I didn't feel like getting up and going and sitting at my sewing machine. I didn't want to have to completely reorganize my living room and move the camera over to the sewing area just so I could get a minute or so of footage going around the perimeter with a machine stitch. So instead, I decided to spend way more time doing it by hand. I think there's an old adage about how you'll expend 200% of the effort to do it in a far worse way, or something to that effect. That's basically me on this project. I don't have any excuses other than I'm lazy and didn't want to set things up a million times. But thankfully, once I got started, the stitching actually ended up going pretty quickly. As soon as I got past that corner point of the lapel, I got into a good rhythm and was able to just continue backstitching until I reached the end. I realize that it may be a little confusing when you see me picking it up constantly and draping it over my finger, and really that's just to make it so that I can more easily put the needle through the fabric. There's no rolling that you should be doing when you do any sort of stitching like this, to my understanding anyway. Thankfully, it didn't introduce any bubbles or puckers that would have made the collar not lay properly once I was actually finished with it. The reason that I'm picking it up is just to make sure that I can actually do the sewing and not for any specific tailoring method that you may think is going on. Jumping ahead, here you can see me doing a quick test iron to make sure that this fabric doesn't melt when I apply heat to it, because I didn't remember what the fabric was other than velveteen. I don't know if it was a blend, if it was entirely synthetic. I scoured my emails, and it turns out I don't have any record of having ever ordered this. So I guess I did a guest checkout, and they didn't send me a receipt for it or something. But in any case, it was better safe than sorry, so I did a quick test before I started actually pressing the garment. Since we're on the outside now, and I'm not using a pressing cloth because I like to live dangerously, I ended up having to press it in the direction of the pile to make sure that everything was pressing neatly. As it turns out, most of these pieces are not cut with the nap in mind, and that ends up being kind of a problem. But at the same time, unless you're really close to the suit, you can't super tell that everything is kind of mismatched. Since the main part of the garment was made years ago and I didn't care back then, all of the main pieces are going in different directions, and I kind of just have to live with that either way. Why not embrace that in the collar piece too, right? As long as the grain is going in the proper direction, that's all that really matters. Or should matter, anyway. And again, I don't do a whole lot of pressing on this the correct way because I didn't know any better, but this is modern voiceover Jay looking at past Jay and shaking his head sternly. You know what else modern Jay is shaking his head sternly at? Holy shit, the way that I'm using a goddamn razor blade to do my seam ripping instead of using a seam ripper. Somewhere I've mentioned that I have a certain number of items that I always end up buying, and then they go missing right when I need to use them, and unfortunately seam rippers are one of those things. Within the last month, I have had 2 separate seam rippers in my living room, and both of them have gone missing. I guess at this point, I had no idea where either was, and not to be deterred, I just used a goddamn razor to do it instead. So at this point, we have the hair canvas cut out for the front piece. I actually regret that I didn't extend it further down, but that's another thing that modern Jay knows to do that past Jay did not know to do. So take it with a grain of salt. But what I'm doing here is I'm actually putting in my basting lines ahead of time so that I have an idea of what I'm going to end up doing and can stay more or less on track. There's a very specific order and a specific direction that you have to do a lot of these in, according to Bernadette Banner, who is one of the inspirations for me finally learning how to tailor. According to her, you have to do the shoulder point to hem, then the lower side point to hem, then the waist to point number 1 intersection. Then 4 and 5 are the waist to hem, going from the waist to the hem. 4 is along the edge, and 5 is a little bit in from that. And then 6 and 7 go up from those 2 lines, from the waist up to the shoulder point. 8 is the actual roll line, where your lapel will flip outward towards the breast. 9 is the shoulder to underarm in a swooping curve, and 10 is the arm's eye. And I can't really verify whether or not any of that is correct. The tailoring book that I picked up recently doesn't actually do any of this basting, so I'm not sure if this is something that is more historically oriented, or if it's something that has been lost to time, or something that is personal preference, but I've been doing this on all of the tailoring that I've been doing lately, and it really seems to hold it in place, especially on fabrics that don't have as much body to them and are a little bit stretchy, let's say. There's a teaser for you for the next project that I end up tackling. But I end up basting through all of these lines, and it keeps it very sturdy. In this video, for some reason, I'm basting in red. I'm not really sure why I chose to do it in red, other than it was the thread that I had on hand, and I was too lazy to stand up. Ah, yes, here we are again. Too lazy to stand up. This is how a lot of these projects go. Trust me. The one thing that I do want to say is that after looking through my new tailoring book, there is a little bit of discrepancy as to what order you do all of these steps in. So before I start my next project, I'm probably going to have to make myself a list of the order that all of these different tasks are supposed to go in ideally, so that in subsequent videos, it ends up being presented in the format that maybe somebody could learn from instead of repeating my mistakes. Or maybe I find out that actually it doesn't matter so much, and there's not a big improvement between the order of operations being swapped around, but that is something that going forward may change. So, as Bernadette said in her video, I will say in my video, this is not a tutorial. What I've learned since doing this and since doing other projects is that my pad stitching is actually pretty wide. I'm not sure what sort of difference it makes to do narrower pad stitching, but it is something that I have noticed in my tailoring manual. You do the pad stitching over your finger, going from the roll line out to the lapel, making sure to keep it turning as you go through and do the little prick stitches so that you can have as little of the thread showing on the outside while mooring it properly in place so that it will roll once the garment is fully put together. Once all of that is done, I ended up moving on to the stabilizing piece that goes in the upper chest area that kind of keeps it from sagging in the little divot that a lot of us have, depending on the shape of our chest. Especially if we have well-developed pectorals or if we have breasts, there becomes a little hollow in the top of the chest that at one point they used to actually even pad in to make sure that you get a nice smooth front. But these days, I guess, is just accomplished through the use of another piece of the hair canvas that is used for shaping and stabilization. I will say that in Bernadette's video, she made it using this particular shape with a cut in the bottom that then allowed her to shape it to conform more to a breast, which obviously I'm not going to do because I don't want to give the impression of breasts on my suit when I don't have breasts that I wish to accentuate in my suit. Today when I was going through my manual, it looks like there are a couple of different styles of canvas piece that you would put up here that will give you different types of results based on the fabric that it's used in. This particular piece will never be pad stitched to the outer shell, instead it's only pad stitched to the canvas layer that is basted into place right now, and will be held in place later once all of the basting is removed by that piece of canvas. If I remember correctly, in Bernadette's video, she also applied some padding underneath this part and had it encapsulated within the 2 layers of canvas. So if you do wish for that sort of shape, make sure you go check out her updated Victorian tailoring video where she actually does this and shapes it so that it better fits a woman's chest. So hey, do you see how proudly I'm showing you what I'm about to use? This is wrong. Don't use this. What you actually need is some kind of either linen tape or twill tape to put on the inside here. I use 1 centimeter wide linen tape. I preferred the kind that I got that was specifically sold as bookbinding tape because it was stiffer and had a much tighter weave, but you can also get it in a lighter, looser weave, which I'm sure is good for slightly less structured structure, if that makes sense. But you definitely can't use satin seam binding from 1969, you know? This is something that I had laying around. I had linen tape that I ordered, but it got misplaced, and since this was just a test project, I thought, why not use this instead? It'll be totally fine. It added no structure whatsoever. It bound the edges of the hair canvas, which prevented it from being as prickly on the sides, and I guess maybe stuck some of the pieces together a bit better, but it didn't actually do a whole lot to improve the way that the lapels sat or anything else. The thing that did the most of the shaping was just the pad stitching on the hair canvas. Also, the way that I put this tape down would be completely incorrect anyway. You want to go from the top shoulder corner straight down to the hem and a little bit past the hem, when you're doing this sort of stabilization, and then have a separate piece that goes along the edge of the lapel for stabilization, because you want the line of the coat to go straight from the innermost part of the neck on the shoulder straight down to the hem and have everything else flip over. If you put one continuous piece of tape from the top and bottom parts of the main body onto the lapel, it actually prevents it from rolling properly. So it's completely counterintuitive and not what you want to do. Anyway, enough lecturing. Modern voiceover Jay out. Back to vlog Jay. Good morning, happy Friday. We are in the bathroom where I do all my best thinking. So we've been on this project for 3 days. Today will be the third day, and I'm not 100% sure it's going to get done today. I have a hope that it'll get done today, but I don't actually believe that it'll get done today. I have a lot of other things that I gotta get done in the meantime. I need to do some straightening up with other projects that I've been bouncing around so that I can set the sewing machine back up, and hopefully then we'll be able to finish up the outer shell of the coat project that we've been working on. I did get the entire side lapel area done yesterday on one side. Things are looking pretty good so far. So I'm hoping for the best, and I can't wait to get the upper lapel collar piece put back onto the main body and really see where we are with this. Oh, and sleeves, definitely sleeves. So hopefully we'll get all that stuff done today, and then we'll take a look at it this evening and see where we have to go. But in the meantime, happy Friday to everybody that still has meaning to, and I will see you at the next check-in. Nice bed head. And so, just like that, it is Saturday morning, which shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. It's not a surprise to me that I haven't checked in with you since yesterday morning. I did other stuff. I did some chores. I caulked a bunch of my armor pieces for Lauren's, hung out, had like a little sad meltdown about being a creative and wanting to actually make a living from it. So I should back up. The most concise that I can make this story is just that my dad was really high or really drunk or both, and he called me up to try and get me to go fishing, which I'm not going to go fishing with him because I've had COVID and I don't want to be responsible for potentially like hurting him, and he's in a very high risk group. So even though I shouldn't be contagious, it's been weeks, I still have cough, and I don't really want to risk that. So anyway, he called me and he was very upset that I wouldn't go fishing with him. And it turned into like a 4.5 hour long conversation. And toward the end of it, I mentioned that I had finally applied for a job at Starbucks. A friend of mine's trying to get me in, and that I would be going back to work soon because I couldn't get unemployment because my previous employer told me that I wouldn't be receiving any more money, and then gave me another paycheck for a small amount of money, which then made me a liar. So anyway, he was just, listing off things that I do and that I know how to do and that I like doing and that I guess he thinks I'm good at, and just went, one at a time going through some of this stuff and was like trying to get me to pick something and then reassuring me that he would make it work somehow, that we would find a way for that to become what I do. And it was really touching to me. It was really meaningful to me. But the truth of it is, and I'm not gonna get like super into this because I don't want to tank my mood again. The truth of it is, I myself don't have it in me to do the grind necessary to actually be a professional creative. My creativity is not consistent enough. The extraneous shit like marketing and networking and creating content that is eye-grabbing, or making websites and portfolios and social media and keeping things up to date, all of those things that are required when you are like a solo creative are things that I just can't do for myself. And part of it is that I don't have the self-worth for it. I feel like I'm tricking people or trying to trick people into thinking that what I say and what I do is worthwhile. And whenever I've had a situation like with a Patreon or something, or a coffee, or even just people who want to invest in what I'm doing in any way, the moment that money becomes involved, it immediately becomes something that I can't handle. I start stressing out about whether or not what I'm doing is worth the money that they have invested in it, and it immediately makes everything way more stressful. So, unfortunately, it's just not something that I can do from like an energy and time standpoint or from a self-worth standpoint. And I had to explain that to my dad, and he was very heartbroken to hear that, which, you know, meant a lot to me because it meant that he knew all of my skills, he knew like what I was interested in, he believed in them, and then that it made him sad that I couldn't just do that. I talked about that some more because it's been kind of just sitting in the back of my head. And I got really like worked up about it yesterday afternoon, as I tend to do in cycles, talking about this problem that I have and why I'm not capable of monetizing anything. And like even this is me talking to my cell phone in the hopes that the clips that I've been filming this week will make their way into a video to be posted on YouTube. And that's with some vain idea that someone may care and it may catch on, and then maybe I don't know, because then it's the same problem where if I did start getting attention, I'd start worrying about whether or not I was doing good enough or fast enough or well enough or whatever. I was gonna say, like, you know, get that sweet ad revenue, and I was gonna say, get that sweet sponsorship deal, but I actually don't know what I would do if I got a sponsorship deal, if that would also make me feel like I wasn't doing good enough. So, I don't know. Maybe I just have like a self-defeating sort of situation here where there's nothing that would be correct for me, and I will never be able to actually do this. But anyway, we're not dwelling on that today because today we will be productive. But yeah, I lost some hours to that yesterday, being sad, and then also my boyfriend was very supportive. He saw me being sad on the internet, and he got up and came down from work and set his goal to pick me up. So we took a shower together, we had dinner, we hung out and watched shit, we snuggled on the couch, we went to bed and snuggled in the bed, and ended up spending the time doing self-maintenance instead of like actually finishing anything. This video's gone on way longer than it should have for an update about how I did nothing, but I have this like itch in the back of my head today that like I have to finish something. I've got a couple of different things that are on the path to being done. Like they're close enough that I could get them done, or at least to a satisfying conclusion point today. One of those things, of course, is this jacket. It only took me a few hours to do the pad stitching required for one side of it, so I'm gonna do the other side of it, hopefully. Rather than continue to spend time hand sewing unnecessarily, I need to clean off the work table, put the sewing machine back on, and zip through all of these seams. Because there's still more stuff that needs to be done. I'll be doing hand-done buttonholes because I just like doing them. They look nice. They feel good to do. I don't know. But I like doing hand-done buttonholes and shit, so I have 2 of those to put in once like everything else is done. And then I have lining. I need to find a lining material. I think I have a lining material, and it may have even been lining material purchased specifically for this project years ago, but I think I have a little bit of like a maroon shitty $2 lining material. So maybe we'll use that, maybe we won't. I need to see like how much of it I have and make sure that it doesn't like clash terribly with the velveteen. But yeah, so then I would want to get lining in, because the whole point is to have this finished, not just tailored, not just with the facings put in, but actually like finished, that I can say, I completed this UFO. Because my entire life basically is UFOs. And this is hopefully the first in a UFO killer series. So with any luck, I'll have things in the stash already that I can use that will allow me to finish this jacket and call it done and actually have it be done. So that's the goal for today, is to straighten up the work area to shift from armor making to sewing again, and then to get the other canvas put in and pad stitched, and then also to get the facings put in. And if everything goes well, to then potentially also have lining. And for the lining, I have the front pieces still separate, so those will be easy to cut out. I do think I want to maybe put in darts on the front pieces. And of course now, like, I'm like, oh, well, I could also put in, like, welted pockets. Like, I could also do other exciting things to make it more of a real jacket. And, you know, I need practice with that shit anyway. So, like, it just seems smart to do, both from like a function standpoint and from a making things standpoint, like a being complete and practicing skills standpoint. You know me. I may just decide not to. And I'm not entirely sure, once I get it together, I'll make a final decision whether or not the back is going to be altered as well. It does sit against the small of my back well, but it does not sit well on my hips / ass. So we'll have to actually make the jacket and then put it on and then see how it sits. And then we'll make decisions. But anyway, this is going on like way too long for like a mid-roll video like update. That's my goal, is to get the other lapel pad stitched today. And then I'm gonna recut the facing because the old facing was bizarre. We will put everything back together, put some sleeves in, and make some judgments on what else we need to do. Wish me luck! So, I have the canvas all basted in, and I just finished pad stitching the lapel, and I just wanted to take a minute. You probably can't see it because red really blows out on the camera, but this time I was able to get like really, really, really tiny little prick stitches, so it doesn't really show through unless you're looking at it. Even with this weird, like, short pile velveteen look, it doesn't contrast in a way like I was expecting. And, like, you can see it's even, like, when I folded it back, it's sitting up on its own now. It was just such a better experience on this lapel. Like, it went quicker, it went smoother, it's laying like exactly the way that I want it to. I feel like there's been good progress made on this lapel. So I've been busy. I've gotten most of the shell back together. I probably should have fit the shell before I spent all the time tailoring, because now that I've put on a sleeve, you can see I did a little bit of puff at the top. I thought it might be cute, but oh my god, there is so much shoulder depth here, and I think it's because originally it was supposed to sit like really close to the neck, which it doesn't do. So it sits close to the neck, everything is fine with the length of the shoulder, but then the problem is it doesn't want to sit up there. And part of that is because the front here is too short. And see, like, it sits fine on this side, partially because I've pinned it. You can kind of see. It was just very baggy, and I had originally thought that I would add a front dart, but as it turns out, the way that it's cut, it's way better to not use a front dart and to instead just pull it in at the side seam here. Again, this just doesn't sit up there, and I'm actually not sure what, if anything, I can do about that. I think part of it is just how low the closure is going to end up being, but it ends up looking really nice now that I've taken it on one side. And on the other side, I have to rip this sleeve out because it's pulling things down, and obviously I can't continue to take things in on the side. But it's just, I'm a little bit torn because I feel like the side that I haven't attached the upper lapel piece to, and that I haven't put an arm on, a sleeve on, is looking much nicer than the other side, which means that the side that's more finished looks worse. So I'm gonna have to do a little bit of finagling. There's something weird going on up here at the collar that I need to investigate, negotiate, whatever. I'm gonna have to probably take this in because it's very puffy. Something isn't sitting right where these two meet. So I'm gonna I'm going to have to do a little bit of editing for that as well. It doesn't look bad. It's a little puffy. I think we could do better. So I'm going to attempt to do better, and hopefully everything sits nicer. I am really satisfied with the way that the lapel on this side sits. Not so much on this side, but this is actually the side I did second that I felt more strongly about, but the side I did first, no, maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. This one has more obvious threads. So actually, despite what I said yesterday about this one seeming to sit better, right now it is not sitting as good as I would like. But hopefully I can do something to rescue this, because I'm feeling a little down about the progress, and I would like to save this costume. The whole point is to do something to save this costume, and there's a lot of things that I feel uncomfortable or disappointed in, and I need to figure out what I can do to save it. So, good morning. It's Monday morning. I know it makes it seem like I didn't get anything done, but I did get a lot done yesterday. My last update was about tailoring, I think. It was about how I was unhappy with the shell of the jacket and how I should have probably fit that before I spent all the time doing all of the extra pad stitching and shit like that. How I should have made sure that I was actually using my time wisely. But, I took a lot of time pulling apart the seams of the jacket shell, and I ended up pinning it in place. I ended up hand stitching the other half of the collar. I'm unhappy with the original part of the collar, as I mentioned. So I pulled that apart, and I got it mostly restitched, but not completely restitched. So I need to do that. And then I'm actually going to try on the shell pinned and see if I like the way that it fits. Because if it doesn't, then we need to have a talk about UFOs and why I may be 0 for 2 for finishing them. So here's the deal with UFOs. I'm going to go ahead and just record this now, and probably include it either way in some portion, but I was thinking about it a lot yesterday, and I talked to some people about it last night, and I think it's just important that in this, the inaugural UFO Buster project, we talk about how UFOs affect me. These particular UFOs are from 2014, 2015, so they're 5 or 6 years old. It doesn't feel like a long time because 3 years ago, I had a lot of traumatic things happen, all at once / in a line throughout the year of 2017. And ever since then, I've had a lot of mental problems with temporal permanence, maybe we'll say. Time seems fake to me. It simultaneously seems to never pass, and also seems like it passes way too quickly. And it's something that I work on and that I'm working through, but it's something that I can't really do anything to change. But because of that, things that happened 3 years ago feel like they happened earlier this year. So I can tell you that all of this started March 1st, 2017, but it's May now, and it could have happened last March, obviously May 2017, I was in a bad place, and I even remember saying shit at the time that this happened May 1st, and then I was like, oh, what I meant was March 1st, which is only a couple months difference, but even then, time had ceased to have meaning for me. We're getting off topic. Point is, I have temporal impermanence when it comes to how long time actually is. When I think about these projects being 5 or 6 years old, saying it like that, I'm like, oh, yeah, no, that was a while ago. When I think about, well, what costume was I making when all of this shit started? It was Dark Knight Leo. And yet I feel like Dark Knight Leo was really recently. When I think about how long we've been doing Leo Trio, it's not 3 years. It's a year and a half. And when I think about how long I've been doing Ferdinand von Ayer, it's oh, no, we've almost been doing this for a year. So like stuff like that, I'm like, oh wow, like I have to think about things like that and like kind of trace the chronology backwards to know how long it's been. So when I'm picking up these UFOs, I'm like, oh yeah, I started Anders and I never finished him. And that sounds fine. But then what I've run into is kind of a good problem to have situation where I look at these old projects and I remember how it felt. Again, temporal impermanence. I remember how it felt when I was working on these projects and like how I'd wanted to finish them so badly, and like I get this revisiting of those feelings, but then I don't remember that I was actually bad back then. And I know that sounds stupid. I know that that sounds literally like insane. I remember my skills in a kind of impermanent way too, where I pick up these UFOs and I expect the me of 5 or 6 years ago to be at my current skill level. And like literally anybody can tell you that that's stupid. Like, duh, of course your skills are better than they were. If they weren't, it would be a problem. You know, it would mean that you're stagnating and that you're no longer pushing yourself in your craft, which is not true, because I can tell you with some amount of certainty that I've improved and that I have put new skills in and learned new things. And, you know, just that there's a wealth of difference between the me of now and the me of a year ago. You know, even that I can tell you that I have improved between making Dark Knight Leo and Dark Crusader Leo, between Dark Crusader Leo and Dark King Leo that I didn't finish, between Dark King Leo and Dimitri. They're all slightly different types of armor with like different skill sets that are parts of them, but I can show you the marked difference. And like every time I make a new one, I look back at the old ones and I'm like, man, I wish it could have just been a little bit better. You know, and I get that urge to redo them. That's what happens every time I pick up one of these UFOs. I grab it and I'm thinking about it as if it's solid, I just didn't have an understanding of something. Or like all I need to do is add this one skill or something. It'll just get finished and be good. That's not the case, because 5 years ago, I didn't actually know how to make a corset. And like I did a little bit of Googling, and I had put zip ties in as boning because boning was expensive and I couldn't just go get it, to my knowledge. Like it required special tools. I'm talking about like spiral boning, I guess. But anyway, I bought like sturdy zip ties and I used that. But like there's no strength layer. So it was just like thin cotton outer layer, thin faux silk inner layer, and then zip ties. I think I even like followed a pattern on it, but kind of followed a pattern, but didn't follow a pattern. Like I followed the zip tie method from somebody, and it's just like a hot mess. So like I took it apart and I actually just took a pattern off the old pattern because at the time I thought, you know, I'm just going to use the material I have. Redid it, and I did it with like a double canvas strength layer, like more zip ties. And like I guess I'll splice in like some photos here of how that bodice went. I didn't film it because I was just doing things. I was trying to like get moving again. In the end, like I'd lost weight, I had changed shape. There was a lot that was going on with that emotionally, that like I was just starting to make things again after a period of being very down and being very sad. There was a lot of push from me to just make things and to not necessarily show people or tell people or invest people in the success or failure, because I didn't know if I was going to continue making that costume. Like I was really motivated because one of my friends was playing through Dragon Age, but that didn't necessarily mean that I was going to finish it. Especially because, like, my critical eye now is quite different than my critical eye of 2013 when I started it. So I'm looking at it, I'm seeing it, I'm getting all these refs together because I'm like, oh, well, like, what was I supposed to do? There was some sort of, like, stomacher kind of thing that, like, had something that I I was gonna embroider and like then I look at my refs and I'm like, oh my god, there's so much like detail in this costume. And like in my head I knew that, but at the same time I just thought it would be simple to put together. So I started doing some ref gathering and some planning for it, and I put this bodice together. Because of the weird way that I had cut the bodice to accommodate my stomach, I didn't have enough material to actually finish it. It got to a point where I was like really frustrated because I'm like, why didn't I buy more material? Like I used to like obsessively buy too much material because I never really figured out how much material I needed. That would require making muslins and like measuring out fabric amounts and shit like that. So I actually went in blind. I just kind of like was like, okay, well, I think it's like, you know, a yard and a half for pants, maybe 2 yards for a billowy shirt. You know, I'd look something up and say like, oh, well, this says I need like a yard and a half, but like, let's get 2 just to be safe. Because like, I would cut things out wrong, and like, I only worked in final materials, so I would cut things that were unusable and then like need to cut a second one that was usable. I was a little shook that there was no extra fabric that I've been able to find for this. In the end, I like couldn't quite put it back together. There was just not enough ease in the seams because I'm notoriously bad about really narrow seams. I couldn't make it work with the fabric that I had, which wasn't like a huge loss because I didn't actually like skirt portion of the robes. Like, it was very thin. It was just literally, like, I think, like a full width panel cut along the fold line and then stitched weirdly to the bodice. And then, like, the underskirt is literally just a front and back, like, scrunch of fabric on exposed elastic. It's a hot mess. The point is, I couldn't really move forward because I didn't used to keep logs of materials. I don't know, like, part of me is like, oh, I think it was like a Joann's Kona cotton, but like right now I can't go to Joann's and look at their Kona cottons and like take a swatch there and see if I can match it. And like, would I still make it out of Kona cotton? No. And so like I found linen online that I liked, and I wanted to get that and make it fresh out of that. And like a friend of mine even offered to buy it for me, and there was a part of me that was like really motivated to do that. Like, I really wanted to throw myself in and like finish this bodice and use all of these skills that I was learning, all of these skills that I've been honing in the last like 6 years, and like really just throw myself into it. Then there was another part of me that was like, this was supposed to be a UFO. You were supposed to just finish it. If I'm buying new material and like not using the old material, then I'm making a new costume. You see what I'm saying? Like, it's kind of a weird midway point between finishing a UFO and just ticking it off my backlog. In some ways, like, just doing it and finishing it would finish the UFO in the sense that, like, I will have finally done the costume, but it doesn't finish the UFO in the sense that I'm supposed to be finishing stuff with materials on hand because I can't work on new stuff because I can't afford new materials. Also, I'm supposed to be just finishing it with what I already have because it's halfway done. So I'm supposed to be like not redoing a ton of the work. While it does like get it off my backlog list of like things I said I would make and then didn't make, it doesn't get it off my list in the sense that it would be just stash busting, or that it would just be finishing something I started and then hit a roadblock in or something. Like, it doesn't actually accomplish what I set out to do. So I shelved it, and I'm like, cool, whatever, we'll revisit this at a later time. So anyway, I got the hair canvas, and I was gonna just put it in Linhart because I need to finish Linhart and send him off to his new owner once they've paid for him. I was like, oh, well, I don't know if I'm gonna do it correctly. And like, to learn on something that I'm selling to somebody for money is kind of not great. So I went and pulled Elliott out, and I'm like, oh, okay, cool, we'll do like a finished UFO for Elliott. And I remembered that there weren't that many major problems with him. I should be able to just do better tailoring and then like put the hair canvas in and like everything will be fine. And that's not true because that assumes that past Jay had current Jay's skill in pattern making. I know for a fact I just kind of winged it back in the day. I remember showing off the pants because the pants went pretty okay, and then I didn't show off the jacket because it looked like shit. I put it on myself yesterday and it looked like shit, and it was like it hit me really hard and I felt really bad about it. You know, I spent a lot of time seam ripping it and tearing it apart and retailoring it on my mannequin thing, and I feel better about it in theory. We're gonna like get dressed and I guess go traipse around in front of the mirror and see if I still feel that way now. You know, I became more satisfied with it. But there were some things that I couldn't fix. Like the fact that for some reason the shoulder seam is like here. It's like clavicle level. And I think that was just me back then. I think that was a problem that I had regularly, was putting shoulder seams in the wrong spot. Part of it's because I have bad posture. I mean, you can tell by the way that I'm sitting now how rounded my shoulders are. I just hang out. You know, I have back problems and I tend to hunch. That's just how I am. And so I think I maybe didn't give myself enough shoulder room in the front because I was always like kind of hunched forward. And I don't think that I've fixed those problems. I just think I got better at patterning. But like things like that I can't fix. And it hurts because like I know when I made Ferdy, I was using an old jacket that I found at a thrift store for $10 as a base, and it had like a raglan cut, and I had to like super adjust it to get rid of the raglan sleeve holes. But then that made it so that it had a really forward shoulder that like got covered up, but is a fit issue that I have. Working with this jacket just made me feel the same way that that did. That like, you know, I was working with an existing garment and that there had to be a seam there and there was nothing I could do about it. And with Ferdy, I could cover it up. There's a cape, there's armor, there's hair. It's hidden. Nobody needs to know that there's a major problem there, and like we just make sure that I'm adjusted properly before we take photos. But with this, it's supposed to be like this nice tailored jacket, and it's not gonna be. And so yesterday, I did all of this work, and in the end, like I couldn't fix the shoulder seam at all because that's just how it is. And there's part of me that's like, I think I have enough extra velveteen to like recut. And then I didn't want to because the whole point was to just finish it. And there was already a front panel that was usable, you know? And maybe it didn't have everything perfect on it, but like this extra velveteen, I don't know if I have enough to recut the front panels. Again, I don't know where I got it from, so I can't get any more. It's just one of those things that like, I want there to be extra fabric. I want there to be extra velveteen. I want to use it in some other project. Maybe another tailoring project even. But, you know, like maybe I'll put together something cool with it. I guess I just don't want to continue a project that I'm not going to be happy with. And maybe I don't want to continue a project that my skills are beyond. Maybe it's just not good for me to continuously make these old projects new. Maybe it's bad because it makes me feel like I haven't improved at the same time that it makes me feel like I've definitely improved. And I don't think I'm in a mental place that I can feel like I haven't improved in so many years. And like there's stuff like the shoulder seam that I just can't fix, you know? There's nothing that I can do to add more to this shoulder. It goes around the shoulder, but the seam is just here, you know? Like, there's nothing wrong with it other than that it's wrong. There's nothing that can fix it other than cutting a new front piece with more chest. That defeats the purpose. And it simultaneously makes me feel like none of my skills have improved in the last 5 or 6 years, and also that they've improved way more than I thought. I think that it was a good like reminder to me, or a good lesson for me, but I don't know that it's one that is best served by seeing it through to the end. If I continue to work on this and I continue to be upset at myself for not making a well-constructed, flattering, impressive-looking garment that I can show off at the end, I'm just gonna feel like I'm not good. The truth is, I'm polishing a turd. These UFOs are really old and made with bad skills. Or not even bad skills, but just like not as good as they are now skills. You know, maybe I set it aside for a week. Maybe I set it aside for a month. Maybe I set it aside for 6 months. I either pick it up again or maybe I just get rid of it. That sucks. I don't like the idea of just abandoning it or, you know, not finishing it or just throwing it away or whatever. I want to have this costume. Elliott still means a lot to me. You know, we still really like Stardew Valley, and I still think that we could get nice photos of it just to have it off the list. But I just don't know if it's good for me right now. If my brain can latch on to the fact that my skills have obviously improved, and for that to be the main thing it thinks, instead of it doesn't look good enough. We'll find out. My plan is to put it on and see if I like it better pinned than I did unpinned yesterday, and see how that affects me mentally. If I look at it and I think we can do something with this, then I'll thread mark all of the new seams and we will stitch it together. If I put it on and I think it looks like shit, it's getting put back on the UFO shelf. And then this will be the end of the video. I'll post it because I think it's important for people to see that sometimes the best of intentions just don't pan out the way that you want them to. And that maybe, you know, it's okay to just not finish a project. And I guess we'll see which one of those it'll be. So, I think this is the end of Elliott for now. I just don't feel great about it. And I think that I've done a lot of good work. I think that the way the collar sits now is really nice. I think that I did a good job with it as like a starting point. I think that it's still very unflattering. Like here, this isn't quite right. Oh, it looks like a pin dislodged, so I'll give it the benefit of the doubt. Maybe that's why that doesn't look as good. The back looks really nice. I refit the back, and there's a split in the tails now, but I just don't feel good about it, and that's kind of all there is to it. You know, this is just kind of pinned in right now, the sleeve. I think it's kind of frumpy. I think it doesn't super flatter me. It doesn't close particularly well. Some of it I think could be fixed, like or the facing here obviously could be set better and top stitched into place. But I think this is just an L for now. And it might not always be an L, but it is for now. I learned a lot. It was a good effort on my part, and I don't regret doing it. But right now, I just don't have it in me mentally to do this, and I would rather not risk my mental health over finishing a project just because I started recording videos for it. I'll do some thread marking on it just so that future Jay already has some thread marking to go by, and then I think this is gonna be it. Thank you guys for hanging out with me on this journey. I hope it was maybe not inspiring, but reassuring that like, you don't have to always do what you said you were going to. Sometimes you need to make sure that what you do is something that's making you happy and not just something that you can do and that you feel that you should do. Hopefully, the next thing I try to UFO bust will go a little bit better, or I will be in a better mental place for it, and we will have a more successful end. For now, this is going to be it for me and Elliott. In the future, hopefully we'll come up with something a little bit better.